Can't even get a real job, my sister mocked at Sunday dinner. Monday morning she walked into her dream job interview. I sat at the CEO's desk, her resume in my hands. So, tell me why you're qualified? The crystal wine glasses clinked as my sister Emma raised her hand, drawing everyone's attention like she always did. Big news, everyone. Her perfect smile gleamed as she looked around our parents' mahogany dining table. I just got called for an interview at Sterling Enterprises. My mother gasped in delight, nearly dropping her fork. Sterling Enterprises, the biggest tech company in the city? The very same. Emma preened, tossing her expertly highlighted hair. Senior marketing director position. They reached out to me specifically. Of course they had. Everything came easily to Emma. Perfect grades without studying, dream jobs without trying, a constant stream of success that our parents never tired of celebrating. I sat quietly, pushing my food around my plate, trying to become invisible. But in this family, I was never allowed to fade into the background for long, not when they needed someone to compare Emma to. Isn't that wonderful? My mother gushed. Now that's a real career path. She turned to me, her smile turning sharp. You should ask Emma for advice, Sarah. Maybe she can help you find something better. Better than what I was doing now, she meant. Better than the consulting work that they all dismissed as glorified freelancing. Better than building my own company from scratch. Because apparently being your own boss wasn't as impressive as having one. I'm doing fine, Mom, I said quietly, but Emma was already laughing. Oh please. You can't even get a real job. She smirked. How long are you going to pretend that your little consulting thing is an actual career? My father set down his wineglass. Emma has a point, Sarah. You're 32. It's time to get serious about your future. I gripped my fork tighter, thinking about the contracts sitting on my desk at home, the acquisition deals I was negotiating, the empire I had built while they were all busy undermining me. My business is doing well, I started to explain, but Emma cut me off. Business, please. You work from your apartment and barely make enough to pay rent. Meanwhile, I'm about to be a senior director at Sterling. She turned to our parents. Did I mention the salary? Base pay is $250,000 plus bonuses. My mother nearly swooned. My father beamed with pride. I thought about my company's latest quarterly earnings report and had to suppress a laugh. When's the interview? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Monday morning, Emma replied smugly. Not that it matters. The position is practically mine already. The CEO specifically requested to interview me personally. I bet they did, I thought, remembering the stack of resumes on my desk. Among them, Emma's application forwarded to me by HR with a note. Another entitled candidate with an inflated ego. Your call, boss. Well, good luck, I said, standing up. I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow. Emma snickered. What? Did someone finally agree to buy something from you? Sarah. My mother sighed. When are you going to stop this ridiculous independent phase? Your father could have gotten you a proper position years ago. I thought about the nameplate on my office door. The one that reads Sarah Mitchell, CEO, Sterling Enterprises. The one Emma would see tomorrow morning. You're right, Mom, I said, gathering my things. Maybe it is time for a change. They probably thought I was finally admitting defeat. They had no idea what was coming. As I drove home to my penthouse apartment, not that they knew I could afford one, I thought about how we got here. How their constant dismissal had driven me to build something bigger than they could imagine. It started 10 years ago when I graduated with my MBA. Emma was the star of the family then too, climbing the corporate ladder with her natural talent, while I quietly studied market trends and business strategies. When I told them I was starting my own consulting firm, they laughed. When I landed my first major client, they dismissed it as luck. When I started buying up struggling companies and turning them around, they didn't even notice. 5 years ago, I made my biggest move yet, acquiring Sterling Enterprises through a complex series of shell companies and investment firms. The previous CEO was ready to retire, and I had spent years preparing for this moment. I changed my professional name to Sarah Mitchell, my mother's maiden name, knowing my family never paid enough attention to business news to make the connection. I rebuilt Sterling from the ground up, transforming it into the tech giant it is today, and through it all, my family remained blissfully unaware, too busy praising Emma's minor achievements to notice that their unsuccessful daughter was now one of the most powerful CEOs in the city. My phone buzzed as I pulled into my building's private garage. A text from Emma. You should really come to the Sterling building sometime. See what a real company looks like. I'll give you a tour after I get the job. I smiled, thinking of my corner office on the top floor, the one with the view of the entire city, the one Emma had been dreaming about in her application letter. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. In my apartment, I reviewed Emma's resume one more time. It was impressive on paper, good education, steady career progression, solid references, but I had done my research. I knew about the projects she had taken credit for, but barely contributed to, the subordinates she had thrown under the bus, the corners she had cut. Emma had always been good at presenting the perfect image. Tomorrow she would learn that image isn't everything. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. Darling, I know you're probably feeling discouraged seeing Emma's success. Why don't you let your father make some calls? It's not too late to start a proper career. I set the phone down without responding and walked to my home office. The wall was covered in business magazines featuring Sterling's remarkable turnaround. Tech's most innovative CEO, one headline read, Sarah Mitchell, the unseen power player revolutionizing the industry, declared another. My family had spent years telling me I wasn't good enough. Tomorrow, they would learn just how wrong they were. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, typing out an email to HR. Please ensure Miss Emma Carter's interview is scheduled in my office at 9 a.m. sharp. And make sure she waits in the lobby for at least 30 minutes before being brought up. A small petty detail perhaps, but after years of enduring her condescension, I thought I deserved a little dramatic flair. I spent the rest of the evening reviewing company reports and finalizing acquisition plans, just like any other Sunday night. But this Sunday felt different. Tomorrow, everything would change. As I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked nothing like the timid daughter my family still saw me as. My suits were tailored now, my presence commanding. I had grown into my power while they weren't watching. Tomorrow they would finally see me, and I couldn't wait for the show to begin. Monday morning arrived with a sense of delicious anticipation. I stood in my private elevator, ascending to the top floor of Sterling Enterprises, watching the city wake up through the glass walls. My Armani suit was immaculate, my heels clicking authoritatively on the marble floor as I stepped out. Good morning, Miss Mitchell. My executive assistant Diana greeted me with a knowing smile. Your 9 a.m. appointment has arrived early. She's been waiting in the lobby for 20 minutes, insisting that the CEO specifically requested her presence. I checked my watch, 8:45 a.m., let her wait another 10 minutes. How's she handling it? Diana's eyes twinkled. She's demanded coffee 3 times. Name-dropped several executives she claims to know, and told the receptionist that her sister is a nobody who can't even get a proper job. I smiled, setting my briefcase on my desk. Perfect. Has she noticed any of the magazine covers? No. Diana smirked. She's too busy telling everyone within earshot about her marketing expertise to look around. Typical Emma. So focused on promoting herself that she missed the obvious. The lobby walls were lined with press coverage of Sterling's transformation under my leadership. My photo was literally hanging above the reception desk, but Emma would never notice. She never had. Her resume listed some impressive achievements at her current company, Diana noted, arranging folders on my desk. I took the liberty of fact-checking them. And half are exaggerated, a third are outright lies, and the rest were group projects where she took sole credit. I nodded, unsurprised, just like high school. Remember when she won that science fair? The project you actually built while she was at cheerleading practice? The very same. I sat down behind my desk, adjusting my nameplate slightly, sent her up at 9 a.m. exactly. And Diane, make sure the security team is recording the lobby and elevator cameras. I want to preserve this moment. At precisely 9 a.m., my office phone buzzed. Miss Carter is here for her interview, Diana announced formally. Send her in. The door opened, and Emma strode in like she already owned the place. She wore an expensive but slightly too flashy suit, her confidence bordering on arrogance. Then she saw me sitting behind the CEO's desk, the color drained from her face. Sarah? She stammered, frozen in the doorway. What are you doing here? Good morning, Emma, I said pleasantly. Please take a seat. We have a lot to discuss about your application for the senior marketing director position. She didn't move, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But, I'm supposed to meet with Sarah Mitchell, the CEO. I smiled, gesturing to my nameplate. That would be me. Sarah Mitchell, formerly Sarah Carter. Though I'm not surprised you didn't make the connection, you never did pay attention to anything I did. Emma sank into the chair across from me, her perfect composure cracking. This is impossible. You're just a consultant. You work from your apartment. Actually, I leaned back in my chair, enjoying this moment. I own this building and several others. Sterling Enterprises has been my company for the past 5 years. I pulled out her resume. Now shall we discuss your application? I have some questions about these achievements you've listed. You can't be serious, Emma whispered, her voice shaking. You can't be the CEO. You're nobody. That's what you all thought, isn't it? I kept my voice calm, professional. Poor Sarah. Can't even get a real job. Just a nobody working from her apartment. Tell me, Emma, did you ever once ask what kind of consulting I did, what companies I worked with, or were you too busy bragging about your own mediocre accomplishments? She flinched. I didn't. No, you didn't, I agreed. None of you did. You were all too convinced of my failure to notice my success, too busy mocking my choices to see where they were leading. I opened her file. Now, about this claim that you single-handedly increased your department's revenue by 200% last year? That's accurate, she stuttered. But I could see the panic in her eyes. Interesting. I pulled out another document. Because I have here the annual report from your company. The entire marketing department only saw a 30% increase. And according to your former colleagues, that was primarily due to a campaign developed by your junior team, the one you rejected initially but took credit for after it succeeded. Emma's face went from pale to red. You've been investigating me? I investigate all potential senior executives thoroughly. We have very high standards at Sterling. I smiled. Standards that value actual achievement over self-promotion. Just then my phone buzzed. Diana's voice came through the speaker. Miss Mitchell, your parents are in the lobby demanding to see you. They're quite insistent. Of course they were. Emma had probably texted them the moment she saw me. Send them up, I said calmly. I think it's time for a family meeting. Emma shifted nervously in her chair. Sarah, look, about last night, about all the things I've said, save it. I cut her off. I'm not interested in apologies motivated by fear. I spent years listening to you undermine and belittle me. Now you get to sit there and learn exactly who your unsuccessful sister really is. The door burst open. My parents stormed in, their faces a mix of confusion and anger. Sarah, my mother exclaimed. What is the meaning of this? What are you doing in the CEO's office? Hello, Mother, I replied coolly. I was just reviewing Emma's job application. Would you like to join us? We were discussing the importance of honesty and professional achievements. My father's face reddened. Stop this nonsense immediately. You're embarrassing yourself and your sister. I stood up slowly, letting my authority fill the room. No, Dad. For once in your life you're going to listen to me. All of you are. I pressed a button on my desk, and the wall of windows behind me transformed into a screen displaying Sterling's financial growth under my leadership. Welcome to my company. The one you've been hearing about at your country club. The one Emma's been desperate to work for. The one that's been making headlines while you were all too busy dismissing me to notice. They stared at the numbers, the achievements, the empire I had built while they weren't watching. Now, I said, sitting back down, let's talk about what really makes someone successful in business. Shall we begin with integrity, or should we start with actual competence? The color drained from Emma's face as she realized this interview was about to become very, very uncomfortable. And we were just getting started. The silence in my office was deafening as my family stared at the financial projections on the screen. 10 years of growth. Billions in acquisitions. My photo on the cover of Forbes, Fortune, and Business Weekly. This is all yours, my mother whispered, sinking into one of the leather chairs. Every bit of it, I confirmed, standing to walk around my desk. The consulting business you mocked? That was just the beginning. While Emma was bragging about her mid-level marketing positions, I was buying and transforming struggling companies. While you were lamenting my lack of a real job, I was building an empire. My father, always quick to anger, found his voice first. Why didn't you tell us? Why keep this secret? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Tell you? Like I tried to tell you about my first major client, or my first successful company turnaround, or any of my achievements that you dismissed because they didn't fit your narrow definition of success. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Sarah, if we had known, that's exactly the point. I cut her off. You only care now because of what I've built, not who I am. You're only interested because of the power and money, not because you're proud of what I've accomplished. I pressed another button on my desk, and security footage from last night's dinner appeared on the screen. Emma's mocking voice filled the room. Can't even get a real job. Stop, Emma pleaded, her face flushing. We get, do you? I turned to face her directly. Because I've been watching you build your career on exaggerations and stolen credit. I've talked to your former colleagues, your supposed references. I know exactly how you've gotten every position you've ever held. My mother stood up, smoothing her designer dress nervously. Surely we can work something out. We're family after all. Family? I picked up Emma's resume. Like when Emma took credit for my science project in high school, or when she told her college friends I was a drug hout because I started my own business instead of following the corporate path. That kind of family. I was young, Emma protested weakly. We all make mistakes. Yes, we do. I agreed. And now you get to face the consequences of yours. Diana. My assistant entered with a thick folder. The investigation results you requested, Miss Mitchell. Thank you. I opened the folder and began reading. Falsified achievements, stolen ideas, workplace bullying complaints. I looked up at Emma. Did you really think none of this would come out during our background check? Emma's face went pale. Those accusations were never proven. Because you had Daddy's lawyers shut down every investigation, I finished for her. But Sterling takes corporate integrity very seriously. We thoroughly vet all potential executives. My father stepped forward, his business negotiation face on. Now, Sarah, surely we can discuss this privately as a family. You lost that right last night, I replied calmly. When you sat there and let Emma mock me, when you suggested I needed your help to find a real job, When you once again made it clear that nothing I did would ever be good enough, I pressed another button on my desk. The office door opened, and Harold Bennett, my chief legal officer, entered. Harold, please explain to my family the consequences of submitting fraudulent information on a Sterling Enterprises job application. Harold adjusted his glasses. Falsifying credentials and experience on an executive-level application as grounds for immediate rejection and potential legal action, especially if previous employers wish to pursue damages for defamation or intellectual property theft. Emma's composure cracked completely. You wouldn't, you can't. Can't what? I asked softly. Protect my company from someone with a proven history of dishonesty, enforce our ethical standards, or are you suggesting I should give you special treatment because we're family? Sarah, please, my mother begged. Think about what this would do to our reputation, like you thought about mine, all those years of snide comments and dismissive attitudes. I shook my head. No, Mother. Emma's application is rejected. Furthermore, I'm forwarding our findings to her current employer. They should know exactly who they're trusting with their corporate image. Emma burst into tears, but they weren't the calculated sobs she usually used to get her way. These were real, the tears of someone finally facing consequences. As for you two, I turned to my parents. I suggest you take a long, hard look at how you've treated both your daughters. One you praised endlessly despite her dishonesty. The other you dismissed despite her integrity and success. My father's face darkened. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Humiliating your family? No, Dad, I'm not enjoying this at all. I'm doing what you should have done years ago. Holding people accountable for their actions. I walked to the window looking out at the city I now partly owned. You know what the worst part is? If any of you had shown even a moment of genuine interest in my work, you would have known about all this. My name, my full name, has been in the business news for years, but you were all too convinced of my failure to notice my success. I turned back to them. Now I have a board meeting to prepare for. Harold will escort you out. Emma, you'll receive official notification of our decision in writing. I suggest you use this as an opportunity for self-reflection. Sarah, my mother tried one last time. We can still be a family. We can work through this. I sat back down at my desk picking up a report. We'll always be related, Mother. But family, that requires respect, support, and love, none of which you've shown me. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run. They left in silence, Emma's tears still falling, my parents' pride in shambles. As the door closed behind them, Diana entered with a cup of coffee. Are you okay? She asked softly. I took a deep breath, looking at the family photo I kept in my drawer. Not of my parents or Emma, but of my grandfather, the only one who had believed in me from the start. You know what, Diana? I am. For the first time in years, I really am. Over the next few months, the family dynamics shifted dramatically. Emma's current employer launched an investigation into her past achievements, leading to her eventual resignation. My parents stopped appearing in society pages, their social standing diminished by the revelation that they had dismissed their successful daughter while enabling their dishonest one. I focused on my work, continuing to build Sterling into an even stronger company. The business world buzzed with the story once it got out. The secret CEO who had hidden her success from her unsupportive family. It became a symbol of quiet determination triumphing over loud mediocrity. 6 months later, I received a letter from Emma. Not an email or text, but a handwritten letter of apology. For the first time in her life, she had been forced to work her way up from an entry-level position, no family connections to rely on. She wrote that she finally understood the value of genuine achievement. My parents took longer to come around. But eventually my mother sent a similar letter acknowledging their failures and asking for a chance to really know me. Not as the daughter they had dismissed, but as the woman I had become. I kept both letters in my desk next to my grandfather's photo, not because I was ready to forgive, but because they reminded me of an important truth. Success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. 1 year to the day after that fateful interview, I sat in my office reviewing quarterly reports. Diana entered with the latest business magazine. The cover story, Sterling CEO Sarah Mitchell, The Power of Quiet Success. The article didn't mention my family drama or Emma's failed interview. It focused on what really mattered. The company I had built, the innovations we had created, the changes we had made in the industry. Because in the end, that's what real success looks like. Not bragging at family dinners or inflating achievements, but building something meaningful, something lasting. They had called me worthless at family dinner. Now I was their boss, their superior, their example of what true success looks like. And that was worth more than any revenge could ever be.
My parents gave me $500 and kicked me out after my golden sister was born. But 17 years later, I 35 minutes work as a software engineer at one of the major tech companies on the West Coast. After nearly a decade in the industry, I've finally built a stable life for myself, good salary, comfortable apartment, and even some investments for the future. From the outside, it probably looks like I'm living the American dream, but recently something happened that's been forcing me to confront my past, and I'm struggling with how to handle it. My parents, 60 meters 58 Fahrenheit, contacted me after 17 years of complete silence, asking for my help with my sister 13 Fahrenheit. To understand why this is such a big deal, you need to know our history. I was never the child my parents wanted. They had been trying for a daughter for years before I was born, and they made no secret of their disappointment when they got me instead. Growing up, I often overheard them referring to me as their spare or a remnant when talking to relatives or friends. My mom was a high school teacher and my dad worked in real estate, so we weren't poor, but they always acted like my existence was draining their resources. I have vivid memories of family gatherings where relatives would try to convince my parents to be grateful for having a healthy son. My aunt would say things like, "At least he's smart and well-behaved," or "Many couples can't have children at all." But my parents would just brush these comments off, saying things like, "Unless it's a girl, we don't really have a child yet." I learned to make myself scarce during these conversations, but their words still cut deep, especially during holidays or family events. When I was in middle school, I started getting really interested in computers and programming. I'd spend hours in the school computer lab, teaching myself coding from whatever resources I could find online. My computer science teacher noticed my passion and started mentoring me, even letting me stay late after school to work on projects. But when I tried to share my accomplishments with my parents, they'd just nod absently or change the subject to their ongoing attempts to have another child. Everything changed when I was 15. After years of trying, my parents finally had their miracle baby, my sister. The moment she was born, it was like a switch flipped in our house. Suddenly there was joy, celebration, and love, just none of it was directed at me. They poured everything into her, their time, money, attention, and affection. I understood she was their priority, but the contrast in how they treated us was stark and painful. I still remember when I won first place in a state-level programming competition during my junior year. The prize included a small scholarship for college. When I came home with the trophy and certificate, my parents barely looked up from cooing over my sister trying to stack blocks. But when she managed to put 3 blocks on top of each other, that warranted a family celebration with cake and pictures. At school, I threw myself into coding and my studies, knowing education was my ticket to independence. I started doing freelance web development work on the side, hiding the money I earned because I had a feeling I'd need it someday. That instinct proved right when my 18th birthday came around. Instead of any kind of celebration, my parents sat me down for what they called an important discussion. Looking back, I think they've been planning this for a while. They explained that they needed my room for my sister's playroom and educational space. They had already decided I would move out immediately. When I tried explaining that I needed time to save money and find a place, they shut me down completely. According to them, I'd had plenty of time to prepare and should be able to manage on my own. My dad handed me an envelope with $500, what he called startup money, and told me I had until the weekend to leave. This was on a Tuesday. I packed what I could into my old high school backpack and a few garbage bags, some clothes, my laptop, and the money I'd secretly saved from my freelance work, about $3,000. I remember my sister, just 3 years old then, watching from the hallway as I packed, not understanding what was happening. Those first few years were brutal. I couch-surfed between friends' places, careful not to overstay my welcome anywhere. I worked multiple jobs, overnight shifts at 7-Eleven, day labor at construction sites, freelance coding whenever I could find clients. I'd sleep in public libraries during the day between jobs, using their computers to look for better opportunities and teach myself new programming languages. I lived on ramen noodles and whatever was on sale at the dollar store. There were nights I went to bed hungry, not knowing if I could afford my next meal. The worst part was during winter, when I'd sometimes have to choose between paying for a warm place to sleep or having enough food to eat. Despite everything, I still tried to maintain some contact with my parents during those early years. I'd call them occasionally, hoping for even the smallest sign that they cared about my well-being. But every conversation was short and uncomfortable, with them clearly waiting for it to end. They never asked how I was doing or if I needed anything. When I mentioned I was taking community college classes while working, they just said that's nice and changed the subject to my sister's preschool achievements. After 2 years of being the only one reaching out, I stopped trying. They never called to check on me, never sent a message during holidays or birthdays. Not even when I finally got my first real tech job after teaching myself full-stack development. I remember wanting to tell them so badly that I'd finally made it, but their number had already been disconnected. Those early years after being kicked out taught me invaluable lessons about survival and self-reliance. While juggling multiple jobs, I never stopped coding. During my breaks at the convenience store, I'd study programming documentation on my phone. Between shifts at construction sites, I'd work on small freelance projects at the public library. The library became my sanctuary. Free Wi-Fi, air conditioning, and most importantly, access to computers where I could practice coding. My break finally came when a small startup took a chance on me as a junior developer. They were impressed by my portfolio of freelance work and my contributions to open-source projects. The salary wasn't great by tech standards, but it was life-changing for me. For the first time, I could afford a tiny studio apartment and didn't have to worry about where I'd sleep each night. I threw myself into the work, putting in 70-hour weeks and learning everything I could. Database management, system architecture, cloud computing. I absorbed it all like a sponge. My colleagues noticed my dedication, and soon I was leading small projects. During nights and weekends, I continued contributing to open source projects and building my own applications. It wasn't just about the money anymore. I'd found something I truly loved doing. The real turning point came when one of the major tech companies noticed my contributions to their open source platform. They reached out with an interview offer, and after 6 rounds of technical interviews, I landed a position that completely changed my life. 7 years later, I'm now a senior software engineer leading a significant project team. I have a modern apartment in a secure building, a healthy investment portfolio, and enough savings to feel confident about my future. I thought I'd finally close the chapter on my past until 3 days ago, when my father's number appeared on my phone. After 17 years of complete silence, hearing his voice was jarring. He sounded older, desperate even. He said they needed to talk about my sister and it couldn't wait. What followed was a conversation that left me reeling. My sister, now 13, is apparently in serious trouble. She's been caught shoplifting multiple times, regularly skips school, and hangs out with a crowd of older teenagers my parents don't approve of. More worryingly, they've found drugs in her room twice, and she's had several run-ins with local law enforcement. She's already been through 3 different rehabilitation programs, none of which seem to help. The real reason for their call became clear when my father brought up their financial situation. They've spent over $200,000 on various treatment programs, counseling sessions, and legal fees. They've remortgaged their house, maxed out multiple credit cards, and sold most of their valuable possessions. Now they're looking at a specialized long-term treatment facility that costs $75,000, and they're desperate for help. My mother got on the phone, crying, saying they had nowhere else to turn. She kept repeating how family needs to stick together and that I'm their only hope for saving my sister. The irony of hearing these words from the same people who kicked me out at 18 and never looked back hit me hard. Where was this family unity when I was sleeping in my car between couch surfing arrangements? Where was it during those countless nights I went to bed hungry? They're asking for help with the treatment program costs, plus assistance with their mortgage payments and credit card debt. In total, they need almost $100,000. My father even suggested setting up a payment plan if I couldn't provide the full amount immediately. I'll be honest, I could help them if I wanted to. Years of living frugally and smart investing have left me in a stable financial position, but the thought of giving them access to my finances makes me physically ill. This is money I earned through years of hard work and sacrifice, often going hungry and homeless while teaching myself to code. The complexity of this situation keeps me up at night. Part of me feels guilty for even hesitating to help. My sister is just a kid after all. She never asked to be born into this mess, and maybe if someone had been there for me during my teenage years, things would have been different. But then I remember how my parents treated me, how they kicked me out without a second thought and never once checked to see if I was alive or dead for 17 years. Yesterday they called again, asking to meet in person. They said they want to explain everything and make things right. They suggested meeting at an upscale restaurant in my area, offering to drive the 4 hours to see me. Something about their eagerness makes me uneasy, like they're trying too hard to manipulate the situation in their favor. My girlfriend, 34 Fahrenheit, thinks I should maintain firm boundaries. She's seen firsthand how hard I've worked to build my life and heal from my childhood trauma. She's worried that letting my parents back in could undo years of emotional progress. My best friend, who let me crash on his couch during those rough early years, says I don't owe my parents anything but suggests I consider helping my sister directly if I want to. Right now, I'm completely torn. The logical part of me says to maintain the distance that has allowed me to thrive. My parents haven't changed. They still see me as a resource to be used, not a son to be loved. The way they're approaching this situation, focusing on the money rather than attempting to make amends for the past, speaks volumes about their true intentions. But the emotional part of me can't stop thinking about my sister, a troubled teenager who might be acting out because of the same toxic family dynamics that I escaped. Am I perpetuating the cycle of abandonment by refusing to help, or would helping just enable my parents' manipulative behavior? I've worked incredibly hard to build a life I'm proud of, one that those scared nights sleeping in my car taught me to never take for granted. Now I feel like I'm being dragged back into the chaos I spent years trying to escape. Do I help them and risk getting pulled back into their manipulation? Do I try to help my sister directly somehow, or do I maintain the boundaries that have allowed me to heal and thrive? Whatever I decide, I know I'll question it. If I help, I might resent them for pulling me back in. If I don't, I might always wonder if I could have made a difference in my sister's life. The weight of this decision is crushing, and I could really use some outside perspective. Update 1. After reading your comments and suggestions, I decided to meet my parents at a coffee shop downtown. I figured a public place would help keep things civil and give me an easy exit if needed. The moment I saw them walk in, I was struck by how much they'd aged. They looked exhausted, with dark circles under their eyes and noticeably more gray hair than I remembered. They wasted no time getting into details. My sister's issues are apparently worse than they initially described over the phone. Beyond the substance use and legal troubles, she's had to go through multiple rehabilitation programs, all of which they've had to pay for out of pocket. She's not just skipping school occasionally. She hasn't attended a full week of classes in months. She sneaks out regularly, often disappearing for days at a time with friends who are clearly a terrible influence. My parents showed me their financial records on their phones. They weren't exaggerating about their situation. They've sold most of their valuable possessions, including my childhood home, to cover these expenses. They're now living in a small apartment and struggling to make ends meet. They even mentioned selling some family heirlooms which they estimate will only keep them afloat for a few more months. Throughout our conversation there was this underlying expectation that made me uncomfortable. They kept bringing up family obligations and my duty as their son to help out. It felt like they thought that no matter what they'd done in the past, I would step up simply because we're related. The way they talked made it clear they hadn't really processed how they'd hurt me, or even acknowledged their past treatment. As they kept going, I could feel all my old anger and resentment bubbling up. They didn't see any of this as their fault. They brushed off kicking me out at 18, saying it was just parenting and they'd done what was best for the family at the time. They acted like it was perfectly normal to treat me the way they did, and now they expected me to forgive everything and swoop in to fix their problems. I realized they weren't looking for forgiveness or understanding. They were looking for a solution, and to them, that solution was my money. They needed someone to take on the financial burden of all the decisions they'd made over the years, and I was their last resort. After listening to everything they had to say, I told them firmly that I couldn't help them. I explained that I'd worked hard to build a life on my own after they left me stranded, and I wasn't in a position emotionally or ethically to support them now. I made it clear that I didn't feel any obligation to bail them out of a mess they'd created themselves. They didn't take my refusal well at all. Their faces hardened, and their tone changed completely. They called me selfish, said I was abandoning my family, and accused me of being heartless for not helping my sister. I could see the anger and disappointment in their eyes. It was like looking back into my childhood. Nothing had changed. They were still trying to guilt me into feeling like I owed them something. I left that meeting feeling more conflicted than when I went in. Part of me feels relieved that I set a boundary and stood up for myself, but another part feels guilty, like maybe I'm turning my back on them when they're at their lowest. It's hard to explain, but even though I know they hurt me deeply, it still feels strange to walk away from them like this. I keep thinking about their situation and about my sister, who I don't even know. I feel sorry for her, but I don't believe I can save her. It's painful to realize that even after all these years, my parents don't see me as an individual with my own life and struggles, but instead just as someone they can use to fix their problems. I'm trying to let go of the guilt, but it's hard. Am I wrong for sticking to my decision? Should I have tried to find some middle ground? I keep replaying the meeting in my mind, wondering if I made the right call. Update 2. Things have gotten even crazier since my last update, which was only about a week ago. Just a few hours ago, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, I heard my sister's voice for the first time. This caught me completely off guard. I barely know her, with only vague memories from when she was a baby right before I left home. The call started surprisingly well. Her voice was polite, almost sweet, which was unexpected given everything I'd heard about her behavior. She began by asking me to help our parents with their current financial situation. I could tell she'd rehearsed this pitch because she was laying it on thick about how they were struggling and how I could save the family. I tried to keep my response respectful but firm, explaining that my relationship with our parents was complicated and that I had to make decisions that were best for me. That's when everything changed. Her demeanor flipped like a switch. She went from polite to furious in seconds, starting to accuse me of being selfish and abandoning her with all the responsibility of dealing with our parents. She kept saying I was turning my back on my family and had always been jealous of her. According to her, I was acting superior because I'd gotten away and started my own life while they'd been the ones supporting me all along. Her words shocked me. They sounded eerily familiar, almost like she was reciting something she'd heard many times before. Besides, she spoke with such entitlement about my help, as if she genuinely believed it was my obligation to step in and fix everything. I was so taken aback that I couldn't even respond. Here was this person I'd never had a relationship with, demanding that I make up for years of choices I had nothing to do with. After her emotional outburst, she hung up before I could process what had just happened. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to make sense of it all. Where was this hostility coming from? Why did she think I'd abandoned her? I needed answers. I called my parents, determined to understand what was going on. As soon as they picked up, I asked them directly if they'd been telling my sister that I'd abandoned her and them. There was a telling pause before they finally admitted the truth. For years, they'd been feeding my sister a completely twisted version of why I left. They told her I couldn't handle sharing their attention with a younger sibling and had cut ties with them out of spite. They'd painted me as a selfish older brother who abandoned the family because I was jealous of her. The reality that they'd made me feel like an outsider from the moment she was born and kicked me out as soon as I turned 18 had been completely erased from their narrative. I felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. All these years, my sister has grown up believing I was the villain in this story. No wonder she felt like I'd abandoned her. She'd been raised on a steady diet of lies about who I was and why I left. Meanwhile, the truth about my parents making me feel unwanted from birth and forcing me out of the house had been carefully hidden from her. I hung up on them after that revelation. They haven't tried to reach out again, but then again, it's only been a few hours since our last conversation. I'm angry at my parents for lying to my sister about me and for making her think I was the one who walked away. But I'm also frustrated with my sister for lashing out at me and demanding my help as if I owe it to her. This resentment is hard to shake off, but now I'm also feeling a different kind of guilt. I wish my parents had told her the truth about why I left. Maybe if they had, things would be different between my sister and me. I might not have been able to help my parents financially, but I definitely would have been able to build some kind of relationship with my sister and possibly help her avoid some of these behavioral issues. But now it feels like there's too much damage to fix. I'm not even sure if I want to try. This whole situation is exhausting because just when I thought I was done with my family for good, they came back in the worst possible way. I know many comments have suggested I just block my parents and move on completely, but it's not that simple for me. Call me whatever you want, but this is still family, and I feel like I need to know what's going on at the very least. I'm definitely in no position to help my family out financially, but this is the first time they've reached out to me, and part of me can't ignore that completely. Still, it's clear to me that my parents are still trying to manipulate the situation to get what they want, and my sister is too wrapped up in their version of the story to see things differently. I don't know what else to do. I can't help feeling like any choice I make will be the wrong one. The way they've twisted the narrative of my departure makes me even more certain that maintaining my distance is the right choice, but it also makes me sad for my sister. She's grown up with this distorted view of family history, and it's clearly affecting her behavior and relationships. I wonder if there's any way to repair this damage, or if it's better to just let it be. Update 3. It's been a few months since my last update, and I've had a lot of time to reflect and let things settle down. Honestly, it's been quieter for me, but only because I made the choice to stay out of the mess my parents and sister have created. I'm learning that sometimes the best way to find peace is by stepping back and not letting their drama consume my life. About a month after my last update, my parents called again. I was dreading it, but I picked up because I wanted to hear what they had to say this time. They were even more desperate than before and used every tactic they could think of to guilt me into giving them money. They talked about how dire things were, how they were on the verge of losing everything, and how they needed me to step in and fix it. At first they tried the whole, family is supposed to stick together, guilt trip again. When that didn't work, they switched to threats, saying they would make my life miserable if I didn't help them. Then they changed tactics again, claiming I was their only hope now. Honestly, I was disgusted. After everything that happened, they still had the audacity to threaten me, and not once did they stop to acknowledge how badly they had treated me. I stood my ground and told them again that I couldn't help them financially and that it wasn't my responsibility to fix their problems. I reminded them that they had made these choices, and it wasn't on me to clean up the mess. They weren't happy about that, obviously. They kept calling for the next month, alternating between guilt trips and threats. Eventually, they stopped calling. I figured they had finally realized I wasn't going to cave. For a month I didn't hear anything from them, and honestly, I thought that might be the end of it. But then, just about a week ago, I got another call. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. The situation had only gotten worse. They told me they had to declare bankruptcy. They'd sold almost everything they owned to cover their debts and were basically starting over with nothing. Then they dropped another bombshell. My sister had completely cut contact with them and moved in with one of her friends. She's only 13, but somehow she managed to move in with a friend's family who, according to my parents, enables her bad behavior. When I asked why they didn't get the authorities involved, they said it was for the best, that my sister no longer lived with them because they couldn't see themselves helping her anymore. So they've essentially abandoned their second child as well. At first they tried to put the blame on me. They said that if I had just helped them out when they asked, none of this would have happened. They claimed I was the reason everything went downhill. Of course, they couldn't admit that they were responsible for their own actions. I was beyond angry. I told them straight up that everything happening to them was a result of their own decisions and the way they had treated me. I reminded them of how they kicked me out when I turned 18, how they treated me like a second-class citizen in my own home, and how they ignored me when I needed them. I reminded them about how they didn't even acknowledge how that affected me, and instead just kept trying to shift the blame onto me. That's when they finally stopped making excuses and started backtracking. They apologized and said they regretted everything they had done to me. They told me they wished they had done things differently. It felt like they were saying all the right things, but it was too little, too late. I couldn't just forget how they had treated me for years, and I couldn't erase the fact that they had destroyed 2 lives, mine and my sister's. They had pushed me away, and now they were reaping the consequences of that decision. I felt pity for them, I honestly did, but at the same time I knew I couldn't sacrifice the life I'd built for myself to try to fix things that were already broken. I told them I couldn't offer any help and that I needed to keep my distance. They were upset, but I stayed firm in my decision. After I hung up, I still felt angry at them for what they did to me, but at the same time, I was sad for them. I wish they had taken the time to see what they were doing wrong when they had the chance, but now it's too late. I've made my peace with the fact that I can't save them, and that's something I'm learning to live with. I don't know what the future holds for them or for my sister. All I know is that I'm not going to let their mistakes ruin my peace. I've come too far to let them pull me back into their chaos. Maybe over time I'll try to reach out to my sister again and see if I can help get her on the right track, but for now I have much bigger things to worry about. I can only hope that she learns from all of this and makes better choices than our parents did. So yeah, that's about it for me. It'll be a long while before I check in on my family again. I know this isn't exactly the happiest ending, but it's something that I've made peace with. Thank you all for the advice and support throughout this journey. It really helped me stay strong in my decisions.